Good morning and welcome to DataBank's CISO Corner, where we discuss cybersecurity from the CISO's perspective. I'm Dane Dittemore, Solutions Marketing Director at DataBank, and I'll be your host. Our podcast is for CISOs and security practitioners and those that want the scoop quickly, and those that want to hear from the experts that do this every day. With me today is Mark Houpt, DataBank's Chief Information Security Officer. Good morning, Mark.
Good day, Dane. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Glad you can be with us today. As many of our listeners already know, Mark leads all things related to security and compliance throughout the company. And Mark, I know we have a special guest from your team today, so I'll let you introduce your team.
Great. So actually, we have two special guests. Many of you who are listeners to this podcast will remember Tyler Treat, our security engineering team lead. Tyler, why don't you say hello to everybody?
Hey there. Good morning.
All right. Thank you, Tyler. And our special guest today that nobody knows, but is an instrumental behind the scenes a practitioner of security here at DataBank is Stephen Maiorca. Steve.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Steve. Steve hails from California for us, so he's one of our tools, if you will, that we allow to operate across entire time zones here in the United States. That we can service our customers across those time zones. So he's working on that Pacific time, while the rest of us are working on the East Coast and the Central time zone here in the United States. But we'll include Steve here early in the morning and get things rolling.
That's fantastic. Steve, great to have you with us as well. And Tyler, welcome back. We hope our listeners and families are well and safe, and we understand the immense human impact that recent events are having on all of us, of course. So we appreciate your time. Today in episode 3, Mark and his team will be discussing the COVID pandemic and how that's impacting security, as well as the importance of continuous monitoring, among other things. And so Mark, why don't you kick us off?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dane. So one of the things that we can't avoid in this time frame is talking about COVID. I know on the previous episodes, we talked about continuity of operations planning and how to establish that with COVID and how to operate that within the COVID environment. What I want to take a look at today is some additional things that are occurring within the security field regarding COVID as we move into more of a long-term or sustainable situation with what's going on in our world. Certainly, as we record this on May 15th, a lot of states and a lot of local situations are starting to ease their restrictions and come out of a number of the stay-at-home, shelter-in-place type of orders that have existed. But one of the things that's starting to impact security over the past couple of weeks has been, as companies move into this sustainment mode, we've been seeing a number of security questionnaires that are specific to COVID continuity of operations coming into DataBank. And I know a lot of my other CISO partners are either issuing those or receiving those if they're on the service provider side of things as well. One of the things I wanted to do was talk about those a little bit because, you know, every company has a risk appetite and a risk responsibility. And one of the ways that we determine our risk is through the questionnaires, especially when it's related to vendors. So let me be very clear that questionnaires are an appropriate risk tool if used accurately and appropriately. But one of the things that I've been seeing in these questionnaires that are coming out, unfortunately, are irrelevant questionnaires. One of the things that our customers, and in any case, whomever's listening to this podcast, whether you are associated with DataBank or not, one of the things that you need to do is make sure that your questionnaire is relevant to the services that are being rendered by the vendor that you're requesting to fill out that questionnaire. We at DataBank have seen all ranges of these types of questionnaires. I've seen questionnaires come in from competing companies that may have small co-location spaces within DataBank, and the questionnaires are clearly directed towards gaining a competitive intelligence gathering type of information. I would deem that those types of questionnaires are probably inappropriate. Although I applaud you for trying to send those out and try and work with those. Those are inappropriate. When you're trying to gain a competitive advantage during a situation that's considered a crisis, or considered a risen level of activity and concern, let's try to be a little bit more respectful about that type of situation. Then I've seen questionnaires that are very focused on the services that are rendered, and those are the greatest questionnaires. They want to make sure, if you're a co-location customer, they want to make sure that the facility is still operational, that all the security controls that apply to their environment, such as the badge readers and so on and so forth, are actually operating, and there's people in the facilities that can help them, that can make sure that those systems are maintaining operations. They're asking questions about continuity of operations and continuous monitoring to make sure that we are not slipping on the continuous monitoring aspect during a continuity of operations piece. So that is an appropriate questionnaire. And then we also have what I call irrelevant questionnaires that are coming through that are asking questions about things that have nothing to do with the services that are being rendered. For example, when DataBank has stated that we are a co-location environment and that we're fully operational and our staffs are in the data center, which means to a co-location person that the services that are being rendered have not changed. People that are rendering those services are not working from home. Getting questionnaires that are blanket questionnaires that are asking how we have dictated work from home router setups, or whether we approve of certain types of internet connections at home. Those things are irrelevant to the situation. And really, a CISO's responsibility is to make sure that when he or she sends out those questionnaires, that they are relevant to the conversation that's being had. Otherwise, they end up being they end up generating a back and forth type of situation that neither party desires to be in. And usually that back and forth situation is where I want to mark non-applicable, and the questionnaires are simply a yes-no type of situation. So non-applicable is not giving me that opportunity. So I would encourage you, if you're going to use a blanket questionnaire, that you should have three options: yes, no, and non-applicable, and understand that a lot of companies are viewing these questionnaires as legal attestations. And so they may not be interested in answering yes or no, because today's yes may be tomorrow's no. So that's just a little update from CISO Corner, if you will, on what I've seen from the COVID aspect of the security questionnaires that have been coming in. My message to you is make sure your questionnaires are relevant. Make sure that they can accurately be completed and filled out by the respondent, so that you don't have the back and forth generation of work that is really unnecessary as you move forward. I want to turn it over now to Tyler and Steve. Gentlemen, what are you seeing out there that's COVID related, that's security related, that is impacting our environments right now? I know we talked about, in a previous situation, we talked about heavy loads of DDoS that was occurring. Tyler, is that continuing to occur right now, or what is impacting our environment from a security perspective?
I mean, I don't want to jinx us or anything, but the DDoS activity is kind of leveled off a bit in as of late. What I'm seeing ramping up is I've seen a lot of application type attacks are kind of coming front and center. People are dredging up old vulnerabilities and like going to town with them where they've not been patched on a customer's application. If it's something very specific on a very specific application, and they're kind of finding these oddball vulnerabilities or that weren't ever very popular, and now all of a sudden they're getting big, and we're going out and digging out IPS rules and things like that haven't been relevant in years, things like that. And that you're seeing defacements, you're seeing ransomware, injection type attacks, and then there's always the standard RDP SSH type attacks, brute force attempts that we've seen forever, but the volume has gone up. Seeing
So-
it coming across from entire /24s, it's just a sweeping.
So what I'm hearing.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's where these people have access to a large swath of IP space, and they're finding weaknesses where people have made the decision to have these services open to the world, and we're reacting and protecting on those.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that we as security practitioners are now dealing with a lot of things that we had dealt with many years ago that people are dredging up. Like, what would be some examples, like WordPress attacks that are taking advantage of defacement of websites? You mentioned ransomware. What are some other specifics of attacks that you're looking at?
Yeah, there was a Telerik vulnerability that came out a couple years ago that's gotten real popular, which is based from my understanding, it's a module that's used in other applications, and we had several rules that applied to that we could put into play, and are now protecting on that.
Okay, great.
But it wasn't known to be in our environment, and then we found a couple things out, and we're able to kick those rules into play, and away we go, off to the races. Right. And they were being actively attempted. So
okay, great. Steve, what are you seeing from your side? I know you and Tyler work quite closely together, but you're on call at different times. So what are you seeing, Steve?
Well, I think the move, and this is not exactly COVID, but it's kind of tied back. Now that there are more companies who are unable to keep their physical presence open, but could sell some of their product online, and have kind of hastily moved to an online manner, I think that's causing some more attack surface that they hadn't realized or hadn't really given a whole lot of thought to, because in some cases, some of these smaller companies are trying to get their stuff out there to keep their people hired and employed and keep basically their little chunk of the economy moving, but have put services up or have opened things up just to get it working. And that's leading to some of what Tyler's talking about, where they've left ports open, they've left old modules open that they probably didn't even realize were accessible. And because there are more people accessing those, smaller companies that may not have been targeted in the past are now ripe targets for the attackers to come back through and give a second look to, because they're getting more traffic and they're doing more business online.
Okay, that is a perfect segue into a different topic. So that's great for COVID. Let's bridge it over into continuous monitoring. What I hear you saying in that is that, there's an increase in people rushing things out the door, and one of the pillars, if not the pillar, of our security department here and our security methodology is continuous monitoring, and making sure that what we say we do, we are doing, and making sure that systems that we have controls over are actually being monitored so we can report and then respond to those reports. So why don't you talk a little bit about how that continuous monitoring can assist these customers that are rushing things out the door to retroactively fix those and then take away the attack surface that you talked about that is being implemented and attacked right now.
Right. So there's generally, for vulnerability scanning and continuous monitoring, and you want to be able to do this on a regular basis. So not just once a month, but weekly, if not daily, depending on the criticality of your site. But you want to run both an external facing scan or a sourced scan and an internal scan. The external scan is going to be the type of scan that is not specific, in that it's probing to see what your attack surface is, what you might have open, what might be vulnerable, but it's not really going after a specific issue yet. It's more of a reconnaissance-based type attack and wants to see what you have out there. And so we deploy an external scan, which will basically run it. It doesn't run as a particular user with a particular set of rights, but we'll show here's what an attacker would see across the internet right now.
So
and brings up
that external vulnerability scan is really taking the view of the attacker that's out there and using the good guy, if you will, to pretend that they're the bad guy and see what the bad guy would see. So this gives the view of the for the customer of what the attacker would look at, correct?
Correct. Now, the internal scan is one that assumes that you have a valid credential of some sort, and it might have been gotten through phishing. It could be, a vulnerability in the system that allows them further access in. That type of scan has a credential and looks at the individual modules that are installed on the system and comes back with a report saying these ones are criticals that need to be patched or replaced because they're end of life. These are highs, these are mediums, these are lows. These are informationals, which may just include, did you know you have these ports open? You should look at them and make sure that if you don't need them, you close them. Don't give anybody access when they don't need it. So I don't think you can ever really get down to a zero attack surface. I've heard some people say that. There is no zero attack surface unless you unplug from the internet. But you want to get it as low and as hard to find as possible so that you can keep your people safe as possible and still provide the services to your customers that they need to consume.
Right, and I think you're absolutely correct. And Tyler, you could jump in here as well about reducing the attack surface, because like you said, we can't disconnect from the internet. So there's always going to be attack surfaces there. But just like in any type of security environment, even military type of tactics, you're going to go after the lowest hanging fruit to attack that. So if you could remove each of those low-hanging fruit attack surfaces, anybody that's going to have difficulty getting through the barrier is going to move on to another system that has that low-hanging fruit still in place to attack it. Tyler, do you have any input on that?
Depending on your attacker, nation state types, people with both time and money, they're gonna find something a lot of times if they beat on something hard enough and have the resources and talent to do what's needed. There's so much, script kiddie type things that are happening. Those are the guys picking off the low hanging fruit. Oh, this WordPress plugin's out of date. Now you've got ransomware, that type of thing.
Right.
So there's a lot of things along those lines. One of the things I think is interesting right now, and we've just kind of started noticing it in about around the past week or so, is we're getting a lot more reports of findings on PCI scans. And I don't know, I haven't had a chance to dig into it yet, but it appears that the ASVs have tightened their screws a little bit since this stuff is kicked off. And I don't know if there's a new policy that's gone into effect. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to dig into it too much, but there's something has changed because we've got customer environments that we know have not materially changed, and all of a sudden we got these findings that we've never seen this alert before. It's strange. There's something strange happening, and I haven't quite got my finger on it yet, but we're going to dig into that and see if we can kind of get a pattern figured out.
So let's make sure. Let's make sure that we can follow up on our next podcast on what that may be, so our customers can prepare for it. I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
I think though that this particular knob that was being turned about intermediate PKI certificates that has popped up kind of brings into account that there are a lot of people and a lot of websites that when you go to, your browsers today will tell you there's something wrong with this certificate. Most of the browser manufacturers have put up this warning. Where the security industry kind of as a whole has failed on that is we haven't really explained to users what to do with that message. Because something's wrong, but that's not helpful to the end user. And there's a lot of times that certain companies will go through and have a lot of certificates and a lot of websites, and they forget to renew one, and it throws up this message. But because of all the other attacks and ransomware and everything kind of coming up, I get calls from friends and family alike who say, I got this message, and they send me a picture of it, and I said, okay, that means their certificate's expired. You might not want to do the business online. You might want to go into the store if they have one to check it, or check to see if it's there somewhere else if you're really worried about it. And because you can't say with 100% accuracy whether it's safe or not, it kind of erodes some public trust.
So Steve, is this something that we're seeing because people are not in the offices and not doing their own continuous monitoring right now, and so they're allowing their certificates to expire over the last couple of months of COVID? Or is it just bad hygiene overall? Is that possibly the reason we see this spike?
So
I think it may have been. It may be, but I think it's actually a little bit of both. Usually you get notifications when you've got those by your provider that's provided the certificates that you've got stuff that's expiring. Maybe in the rush and bustle of the kind of rest of the crisis response for COVID, those might not be as prioritized as highly. But if you're an end-using customer, somebody who isn't in our field, you get that message and it's concerning because you don't know one way or another. Is that safe? Is it not? I don't know. Right. Do I have to go find another vendor? Is that going to be at a higher price point? All that thing is rattling around in their head, whereas we as professionals can usually go, okay, they need to renew their cert, but it's probably fine. It's hard to explain that to people, and I don't think the industry has a good message on how to handle those.
So let's do this. Let our message from this podcast here at DataBank be, the message is simple. If you believe that if you know that you have an SSL certificate, put it on your continuous monitoring calendar, go out and check it today and see when it's due to expire. And it's really simple to check even from a web browser. You just go to your website. You right-click on the key that's up in the browser section there, and you can look at the details of that certificate, and it will even tell you, like on Chrome right now, I'm looking at mine and a particular one for Gmail, and it right-click on it, and it will tell you right there, certificate valid or invalid. Thankfully, Google's got theirs set as valid right now. But that should be our message from here right now. If you have an SSL certificate, you've been out of the office for a couple of months, probably something to go check on to make sure your SSL certificates are actually up to date. Anybody disagree with that?
No, not at all.
Nope.
That's
all right.
It's a good hygiene thing.
There we go.
Great. One of the other things that's been kind of neat is, our team has been largely remote for a long time, and seeing the rest of the organization transition into being remote, like how hitless it was, has been pretty awesome. Like I got to say, I think we've done a great job in supporting that organizationally. It's been nice to watch, and being kind of on the front side, we were always remote, and then seeing everyone else kind of adopt into that, and then you layer on everybody's on Zoom, everybody's on Slack. It's been kind of refreshing, and just the engagement that's going on, and then you've got the thing that comes along with this is now everything is an appointment or a calendar invite, and that has gotten a little bit overwhelming at times, and it's just due to this kind of new way of operating that everybody's getting used to. Everything becomes a 30-minute block on your calendar, and so your work time is kind of drastically shrinking. due to all the meeting invites.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. I've seen that as well, and so that's a great. Believe it or not, that's a great security thing for us to bring up. Is work has to get done, so it's kind of part of continuous monitoring. The real work, if you will, has to get done, and though we need to respect the fact that other people need to have meetings with us and have conversations, we also have daily routine and daily tasks. If you're doing your security program correctly, you probably have a daily checklist, a weekly, monthly, and quarterly type of checklist. Those things need to get done. So, again, another advice piece, message here is, yes, as those meetings increase, go and put some block time on your calendar so that you could actually focus for a couple of hours at a given time on getting the necessary continuous monitoring pieces and other project work done. So, go and put a block thing on there so people can see that whenever they're doing a meeting schedule. Manage your calendar.
Well, and be a good invite sender, right? And check the calendars of the people you're inviting.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's one of the most painful things you run into is, but it gets awkward when we're working with all 4 time zones in the country right now,
Right.
or in the lower 48, and it's tough sometimes when you've got people in all 4 time zones. Someone is missing lunch, right?
Right. Yeah, you don't want to miss lunch. Not
you gotta play a little defense. And the other thing is, everybody's at home now, and everybody is probably working a lot more because it's easier to work. It's easy, after the kids go to bed, to run downstairs and hop on and knock some things out that the meetings all day didn't allow you to get done. And I think from a mental health perspective and sanity overall perspective, you're going to have to start playing a little bit of defense with that, or otherwise we wind up, working 20 hours a day every day, and that's not good for you.
Absolutely. And if you're a CISO that doesn't think that mental health and the wellness of your entire organization, not just your security team, is important, keep in mind that mistakes made by people are a security risk, even if it wasn't a malicious scenario. Most of our security risk actually comes from the insider threat and a mistake made by someone putting the data in the wrong location in a database, or leaving open, as in the case of the Equifax breach, leaving open accidentally an S3 bucket or something like that. Those are security risks to you. So if you as a CISO or a security practitioner are listening to this and saying, what in the world does, talking about mental health and work from home situations like that have to do with security? Well, there it is. When people get tired, they make mistakes. Insider threats exist. Not only that, then you have to take it to the next level. And you have to think about people who are getting frustrated with being at home. There are many people that are, and they may not like the way their company is acting or whatnot towards them, and preventing them from coming back into the office for safety's sake. And so they may try and take their anger and frustration out through some other insider attack. So those are things that we as CISOs that we don't think about very often. We as security practitioners don't think about very often, but in reality, we do need to be thinking about that from a security perspective. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up right now. Let's go for what I call last words. Steve, what would be your biggest piece of advice in 30 seconds or less right now for people that are living and breathing and dealing with this with security environment? Right here within the COVID situation, within the work from home situation, and overall heightened sense of awareness, if you will. What's your 30 seconds of tell us what you think of things?
I think there's a lot of people who have been wondering if they're being too paranoid or not paranoid enough, especially with dealing with online banking and online transactions. And I kind of have to say that I don't know that you can be paranoid enough at times. within reason. I mean, there's a balance there of I need to get things, and especially now that more and more physical stores are closed, you're being forced into the online arena, and it's good to have some healthy skepticism necessarily on what sites look like, and that you kind of get the feel for, is this where I want to be? It's okay to have that. I've had several people ask me if they're being too paranoid, and I'm like, well, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. So
absolutely,
I would say, be cautious, be wary. I mean, it's always buyer beware, right? Caveat emptor. But I think in this time frame when everybody's heightened, it doesn't hurt to look at things and to watch your mail. And I see a lot of things going around about COVID statistics and whatnot, and I don't want to get too far into that, but skeptically kind of evaluating everything is probably a good thing at this point in time.
Absolutely, I agree. That heightened skepticism, if you will allow us to protect against phishing attacks. It will allow us to protect in our personal lives from going to the wrong website that's had the expired SSL certificate, buying something and exposing our data. All right, Tyler, 30 seconds or less. What is your parting advice for us today in the midst of all this heightened situation?
2 words: be mindful. And I'll quantify that with, we're in uncharted territory here for probably most people who are alive at this point. Nobody kind of knows what to expect. Nobody really, there's so much misinformation and disinformation, floating around Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, that, is sifting out the good and the bad, and everybody's on edge. Everybody's being thrust in directions they may not necessarily like. There's people who thrive in an office environment that are on edge now that they're trapped at home, maybe trapped at home with a house full of screaming kids or stuff like that they're not used to having to attempt to be effective in that type of situation from a work perspective. And it's I think we're going to see a lot more discussion about mental health and how all of this plays out. And then like in our situation, we're still fairly locked down, but 15 miles away from me is St. Louis, and they're starting to open back up on the Missouri side. So it's so you got the people who are kind of longing to return to normalcy, and it's basically we got to be mindful. Everybody's in a kind of a different state, I think, emotionally, and it's some people are good, some people a little less good. But be sure to don't run yourself into the ground working from home, working 20-hour days and things like that just because it's convenient. Be mindful of your time, and try and be as effective as you can, and we're kind of all in this together. So
absolutely, thank you, Tyler. And you actually stole mine. Mine was be respectful. Yours is be mindful. I was going to say almost exactly the same thing. Is that dealing with the people from all aspects of our country, and even externally in the UK and Canada over the past couple of days. One of the things that I've been reminded of is that there's people that have different impact and different opinions of what is going on right now, and that I think we just need to be respectful of those. But as security practitioners, as we've discussed throughout this entire episode, we need to be careful as well that we're giving the proper advice and that we're monitoring our systems. All right, well, thank you for joining us on this CISO podcast. Dane, I'm going to turn it back over to you to walk us out.
Okay. Well, thank you. Great discussion today. And I think from my perspective, I love the fact that we talked about the human or the people side of the business, because a lot of times in technology, right, we're talking about products and features and functions and the technicalities of things. And I think this whole pandemic and virus, et cetera, this has really helped us realize that there's a human side of all of this, and ultimately that's that's who we are, right? Yeah, thanks everyone today. Feel free to reach out to any of us individually on LinkedIn, connect with us that way, or if you just want to email the group, CISO@databank.com. We're obviously on social, and certainly you can visit our website to kind of catch up with us. But we hope to catch you next time on DataBank CISO Corner. Be safe, stay secure.